Hello, friends and followers. Well, here's the Drake PS7 Power Supply. This thing's good for 25 amps at 13.8 volts. Anyway, speaking about 13.8 volts, look at that. There's 13.8 volts roughly coming off the output lead. So this thing's running again. And how did I get it running? It wasn't that bad of a deal. So I verified by unsoldering leads from this transistor that at least this one was good in passing because I couldn't get anything out of it. I replaced this little pass transistor, the TIP31. I didn't have to. It was stupid that I did. The old one checked out fine with the meter beeping it, so it was fine. I shouldn't have replaced it, but I did because I was desperate, and I got a Chinese one in here. But anyway, that's in. With these power supplies, it's critical that the regulator board is grounded. It has to be grounded to the chassis. They ground it in 3 places. But if you're going to work on the radio, it has to be grounded. If you want to pull it out and make measurements, this has to be grounded. And when you unscrew or unhook it from all of its mount points, it's not grounded. So what I did was I put a big ground wire into it. Let me turn this thing off first of all. Okay, I turned it off. There's a big, well, I put a ground wire in here, and that wire snakes along the back of the transformer, and it hits an unused ground post right here. So I would do that no matter what. I would put this ground wire in to ground that board, and it just snakes along, and it goes along here, and it hits the board. If this board is ever ungrounded and the power is on, it will fry all these past transistors. They will open up. I don't know why it does that, but I had that happen on a older, different PS7 that had this board on stick pins. They had little stick pins holding the board in, and the ground pin became ungrounded, and the whole power supply fried. And it did that when it was just sitting there running my radio one day, just idling, and it just fried the power supply. The radio went dead. So ever since then, I've been really paranoid about these PS7 power supplies, about assuring this board is grounded. And so what Drake did was they ground the board in 3 places. They ground it here, and they ground it here, and there's another pin down there they ground it. But for me, that's not good enough, because if I'm working on the radio or working on the power supply, I want to have ground. I don't want a clip lead on here to come off. I want a real ground. So I ran this ground wire. And sure enough, I started working on the board, and the ground wire was useful. So anyway, ground wire was in. This transistor was actually bolted to the frame without a mica insulator. So they had this one just bolted to the frame. And it's supposed to have a mica insulator, and it's supposed to have an insulator and a little plastic shim that keeps this collector, because really this outer part is the collector, and it will short to the frame and cause a short. So this is why you don't want it to happen, because here's the TIP31 in the schematic. That's a TIP31 right there. And you have a separate regulator off separate windings on the big transformer here, that you get about 29 volts coming out of here. And that will hit the collector right here. That's the collector. Collector always has no symbol on it. The emitter has symbol. There's the base. Anyway, this collector was right to ground. So when this thing turned on, this voltage here was going right to ground. Anyway, that should have blown the fuse, but the guy put like a huge honker fuse in this thing. So the fuse that the user put in from whoever bought this from, he had a huge honker monker fuse that shouldn't be in there for an AC fuse. So obviously it didn't blow because he had it way over fused, and it just shorted. So anyway, who cares? That's been corrected. So I've ordered a new tip from the USA that's not made in China, just because I don't trust this thing really. And it has the mica pad and a little special plastic thing, because this has to get mounted back to the frame. So, okay, that's the second thing that was wrong. It still would start with this new transistor. And I was starting to pull my hair out, what little hair left, and I thought, okay. And then it kind of came back to me a bit on my old power supply from 2023. I checked this capacitor and it was good. It rung in at around 50 microfarads. That was good. So that one worked. Here's the critical one that has to work. Of course, they have a tantalum in here, and this thing had no capacitance whatsoever. And this is like a starting capacitor. If you picture like an air conditioner motor or something, this starts the whole thing running and it has to have capacitance. So, and not that I'm a genius on the circuit. The circuit is really, really nasty as far as I can't really figure it out. But I did remember from the past that I fixed one of these, and this little tantalum here is critical. This is a 10 UF here. So you got to put a 10 UF in there, and that will start the circuit. I guess it will, something has to start the whole chain to conduct and feedback. And so that'll start, this thing will not be faulted, and it'll simply conduct. It'll power these pins here through that transistor, and then these will fire up, and then the whole feedback loop will begin. It'll power up this driver, and that powers up all these big passes, and then this comes back down through here, and it gets regulated right here. Well, it gets tested here, and then here's all of your voltage regulation and stuff here. Those pots got to be working, check those. Mine were fine. But anyway, the problem in my supply was simply somebody had shorted this out to ground by mounting it improperly. No, this one. Somebody had mounted this one improperly. TIP31 was mounted directly to ground with no mica and no little screw helper, plastic insulator. So it was just grounded. So that right there grounded the circuit and caused contusions. So that wasn't going to work. And then once I figured that out, it still wouldn't start. And then I started just testing capacitors, and I found that this little 10 UF here didn't work. And that's this little tantalum one here on the desk, that little pretty brown, green, blue capacitor. So at any rate, there's the victims that I pulled out of it. This one was actually fine. It tested fine, but I replaced it anyway with some Chinese communist capacitors. So here's where they are in the board. That's the 47 UF there that I replaced on the board. And this is the one that mattered. That's where the tantalum was. And I replaced that thing with a 10 UF. So that brought it back to life. And all I have to do now is wait for this to come in and mount it. And I think this will be good. I could probably test my transmitter now for transmitting and see if it'll transmit, because I got a good power supply with power. I don't really want to run it like this a whole lot, but I could probably test my transmitter now and see if I can transmit with power. As I could feed the transmitter with a bunch of amps now. So that's where I stand on this thing. I hope this was helpful to you. So let's recap what I did. Make sure this board is grounded. Put a ground wire on this board. Run it along the back here. And at least on my power supply, there was a spare ground lead right there on that strip. So put the black wire where that bolt is on that ground lead. Just stick it right there and ground your board. That'll make sure the board's grounded no matter what. Do that. Okay, then you might want to just replace this 47 UF here. Replace that 10 UF. This is a, looks like it's a Japanese capacitor. Replace that one. What is it, an Colson or something? Yeah, that's a good capacitor. A Rubicon, whatever. Replace that one. Especially replace this one. It's a 10 UF. Get that one out of there. Put in some good Chinese communist capacitors. So here's the capacitors that I use. Sorry about the dogs. They're fired up Anyway, I got this kit from Amazon, and it has everything from A to Z in here. I can't say these are very good capacitors, probably. They're probably crap, but they work good enough for fixing old radios. All right, gotta go. Lots of dogs here going crazy. Have a nice day.